Hello viewer, I do appreciate your company to Tasmania, Australia. My name is Don. Tasmania, located off the southern tip of the continent, is the smallest Australian state and the only state to get substantial snowfall. In many ways it's like Canada, with some pretty tall mountains and a cooler climate. The island of Tasmania looks like this from a satellite. My wife Lily and I arrived from our home in Perth, Western Australia on a Qantas jet. We land at the capital city of Hobart, situated in the southern part of Tasmania. The most obvious feature is the Tasman Bridge. This bridge crosses the Darwin River and the harbour. Hobart is situated near some pretty large hills, of which Mount Wellington is the largest. It gives an excellent view overlooking the city and the harbour. The harbour itself gives a wonderful view of the city. The harbour is the home for many large luxury cruise ships. There's also crayfish boats, fishing boats, and loads of yachtsmen from all over the world. Hobart is famous for the Sydney to Hobart yacht race, run every year, sometimes through grueling 20-meter high seas. There are some redeveloped areas down by the docks that have become tourist centers, with lots of bistros, cappuccino bars, and restaurants. I quite like Cascade beer, and this is the Cascade Brewery in Hobart. The shot tower was built in the 1800s, about 10 kilometers outside of Hobart. Molten lead was dropped from the top and formed a round ball by the time it struck the bottom. This is the view looking from the top of the shot tower down to the bottom. Tasmanian highways are generally very good, and it's a pleasure to drive around the island. Here's the main road to Launceston, the second largest city. However, instead of heading north, I'm heading west to Queenstown. Queenstown became the home of a large copper mining and copper smelting center. The smelting process managed to totally kill all the local vegetation leaving a moon-like environment which is only gradually now beginning to regrow. Let's take a look around the town. This commemorative plaque, struck in 1983, says a miner's Sunday. This transition from a prospector's camp to a settled community, commissioned by the Mount Lyell Mining and Railway Company Limited to commemorate the Lyell District Centenary, 15th of October 1983, cast in Queenstown. These early 20th century photographs and etchings illustrate the early copper smelter at Queenstown, which so ruined the environment. This is one of the open pits that exists today, formed by the early copper mining. Here's a view of the town site itself. Pretty basic, rough mining town. A typical miner's shack. When I was there, it was possible to purchase one of these properties for about $18,000 or $20,000. Incredibly cheap. Notice how barren the landscape is even today, long after the smelter has shut. I'm sorry, viewer, you're probably bored with Queenstown, but I taught school for 3 years in an iron ore town with a cinder plant that produced a similar environment, and I've long been fascinated with mining, so I do get carried away, and I did enjoy my visit to Queenstown. Let's move on though. Strawn is a tiny little fishing village on the west coast of Tasmania near the Gordon River. It's famous for its beautiful virgin forest, including the Huron tree, which dates back almost 2,000 years in age in some places. Unfortunately, Strawn is also a site for some timber milling, which leads to conflict between the greenies who want to preserve the forest and the workers who need the jobs. This sign illustrates some of the opposition to the lumber industry. Tasmania is a major source of pulp and paper for newsprint, and pulp cutting occurs throughout the island, but maybe particularly in the northern part near Burnie. Vast tracts of land have been cleared. Taking a boat trip up the Gordon River provides magnificent views of the forests. In places there are traces of the timber industry. My wife and I drive north to the north end of the island. We spend a bit of time in Burnie, which is also a large pulp and paper area. I quite enjoy Australian pubs with their unique architecture. Some of the pubs actually date back to early convict days and have been built with convict labour. We push on from Burnie down south to the Launceston city, the second largest city on the island. One of the sites of interest is the Cataract Gorge, with some large suspension bridges. Tasmania's got some of the earliest bridges in Australia built by convict labour. One is the Ross Bridge, dating back to 1836. I really enjoyed visiting the Red Bridge in Campbelltown, dated 1838. We're headed down to visit the old convict centre of Port Arthur and stop in at the Tasman Arch and the Blowhole. This is the entrance into Port Arthur. The convict centre looks like this, what remains after 150 years. Those bars still look as if they mean business. Here's a historic photograph of the hospital building. There's still the well-preserved remains of an old church that was destroyed by fire. The Broad Arrow Tavern was an active tavern when I was there, and I had a beer there. But after the infamous Tasmanian massacre, the tavern was burnt, and it's been preserved as a memorial for those people who were gunned down. One of the doors into a convict cell. Thanks, viewer, for joining me on this trip to Tasmania, Australia. I was there for about 2 weeks and really drove my drive around the island. Have a good day. Hello, viewer. My name's Don. I do appreciate your company on this trip to Sydney, Australia. A view of the central business district from a plane. A much closer view showing the Sydney Harbour Bridge, and to the left, the Opera House and Circular Quay. This early view of the first British settlement in the early 1800s shows the rocks area down by the harbour today. A statue to Queen Victoria, who ruled during much of the early settlement of Australia, still exists today. On this map of Australia, Sydney can be seen in New South Wales at the lower southeastern end of the continent. For the geographer, the city is located on a ria, or a sunken or drowned riverbed that has been flooded by the sea. Some of Sydney's top attractions, the ones I'll focus on. On the north beyond the map is the Sydney Zoo. At the top is the bridge and Opera House, the Circular Quay, and the rocks. In the center of the map is Centrepoint Tower, the highest tower in Sydney. Like most major metropolitan cities, Sydney has a large proportion of ultra-modern, high-tech buildings. Centrepoint Tower is a key landmark, and here you see the monorail servicing the central business district. Fast and relatively cheap transport around the city. I had an adventure getting up to Centrepoint Tower. I'm in a wheelchair and I got dumped out on the escalator going up to catch the lifts to the top. Nevertheless, we did make it to the top and had a meal in the revolving restaurant. A view from the tower. A sightseeing tour, including the King's Cross area. I really enjoyed visiting the Sydney Aquarium, particularly the views of the sharks. A highlight of my visit was the ferry trip across to the Taronga Zoo, which has a huge collection of animals. A hairy-nosed wombat at the Taronga Zoo. Of course, we have to include the Australian koala bear. They're not really that cute and cuddly, and they do piddle on you. From the giraffe pen, it's possible to get an excellent view of the central business district across the harbour. In fact, all the tourist attractions are there. Centrepoint Tower, the Opera House, and the Sydney Harbour Bridge. Let's look at the Opera House, a central attraction in Sydney. An interior shot of the Opera House. And yet another. The Opera House has a worldwide reputation for its architectural design. The bridge is a great tourist attraction. For a fee, it's possible even to climb over the bridge. Near the Opera House is the Sydney Rocks, one of the first areas of settlement, which still contains many old buildings and is now a popular tourist shopping and dining area. Here's a memorial to the first settlers. In the late 1700s, Governor Philp was given instructions to encourage settlement at Sydney, encouraging soldiers and convicts to set up farms. There's many dining and shopping areas down around here as well. Let's look at some of the older buildings. Circular Quay is the harbour or docking point for large ocean cruisers and luxury liners, as well as the harbour ferries. It's also a popular busking area for Aboriginals and others playing didgeridoos. Don't forget Sydney's beaches, such as Bondi Beach. Thanks, viewer, for joining me on this quick trip to Sydney, New South Wales, Australia. Have a good day. Hi, I'm Don. Welcome to Wheelchair Nomad. This is the first stop over Melbourne, Victoria. I spent 4 days here beginning the 17th of May 2003. I stayed at the Holiday Inn. Here's the lobby of the Holiday Inn, Spencer Street. It's situated directly on the north bank of the Yarra River, right next to the Central Business District, and it overlooks the Crown Casino. From our hotel room, we got a good look at the Crown Casino across the Yarra River, which you see in the center. Here's another view of the Crown Casino, which is the building in the foreground. The tall building is actually the Crown Hotel at $450 a night, a bit over our budget. My traveling companion Richard and myself took a quick walk along the Yarra River at night. Here's the Melbourne skyline. We walked along the Crown Promenade, which is filled with hundreds of coffee shops and tourist shops, as well as pubs and entertainment areas. Here's the casino at night. A truly remarkable sight are huge gas flares that fire off every few minutes, generate lots of light and heat and noise. Here's the Crown Hotel lobby, which is quite astounding with its luxurious decor. We walk along the north bank of the Yarra. The Trade Exhibition Hall is the building to the far right. The Crown Casino is directly across. Here's the Trade Exhibition Hall, directly across from our Holiday Inn Hotel on the other side of the bridge. This is the view from the exhibition hall. The Yarra River is scenic and tranquil. It's lunchtime and Richard and myself look for a cafe along the Crown Promenade. We pick a nice restaurant overlooking the Yarra River, sitting outside to enjoy the sun. We explored the Central Business District, and this, I believe, is the SBS television, very unusual architectural building. The following day we visit St. Kilda's and explore Luna Park, the amusement pavilion. Being in a wheelchair is not much fun, I can tell you, at such a place. You can't go on any of the rides. Richard and myself visit the Monarch Cake Shop in St. Hilda's, which was recommended by my friend Janet. It's run by a Polish migrant. The cakes are truly wonderful, and we enjoy a traditional Polish poppy cake, which Richard's mum used to make him. We also admire the hair room saloons on the opposite side of the road. Lastly, a visit to the beach. I appreciate you joining me to look at my slides of Melbourne. At 3 o'clock in the morning the following day, we flew out to Christchurch, New Zealand. See you there. Hello, viewer. My name is Don. I do appreciate your company on this trip to Adelaide, South Australia. Adelaide, the capital of the state of South Australia, is located almost directly on the ocean and is backed by some large hills. This recent satellite photo shows how the city's expanded to fill the coastal plains. This map labels the sections, with Port Adelaide to the north, the city centre being located a little bit inland, Glenelg, and further south. This tourist map shows the central business area of Adelaide, with North Adelaide located on the north side, the Torrens River, and the central area to the south. An aerial shot of Adelaide. It's also possible to view the city from the hills. The University of Adelaide is one of Australia's older and better known universities. Another one of the university buildings, an entrance to one of the halls of Adelaide University. Adelaide was planned by Captain William Light in the mid-1830s as a planned colony for free settlers and no convicts. By the 1850s, the British colony was becoming quite well established. And certainly by 1896, many of the modern buildings had been constructed and remain today. Choice of Adelaide as a site for the colony depended on the good harbour and an abundance of fresh water. Adelaide also became a railway terminal. Let's have a bit of a look around the city. A view of the Adelaide Convention Centre and the Torrens River. Another view of the skyline. The central business area with the Santos building, which is the highest. As the capital of the state of South Australia, a Parliament building was erected. Here's the post office, and it's a famous landmark. The Adelaide Museum is well worth a visit. Rundle Mall is the central shopping mall in downtown Adelaide. Another view of Adelaide showing the tram service. These balls are a famous landmark of Adelaide, located in a pedestrian mall. Adelaide even has its own Chinatown. Check out the old Adelaide jail with its execution room. Adelaide overlooks a broad wine-growing region and is world famous for its quality Australian wines. The city hosts many international events. It used to be the Grand Prix, now the Calypso 500. It's also the destination of some runs from Darwin to Adelaide to demonstrate solar power. North of the city is the town of Canberra, which is a major tourist site up in the hills. It was settled by German colonists. There are lots of hotels, coffee shops, and wineries and pubs. A great place to visit. When Adelaide was laid out as a planned community, it was surrounded by a large number of parks. The Adelaide Botanical Gardens is truly amazing and is well worth a visit. Here is an early 1903 postcard. A few pictures of the garden today. Adelaide is often called the city of churches, and there are lots of churches. Of course, it's got to have a casino. The central market is well worth a wander through. Light Square is the center of a lot of old buildings, and it's possible to see some of the buildings that dated back to the 1800s and led to Adelaide's early prosperity. The Adelaide Zoo boasts of some very fine animals. Here is Captain William Light, the Surveyor General for the city in the 1830s. Thanks, viewer, for joining me on this quick trip to Adelaide, South Australia. Have a good day. My sister Margaret and her husband Ken Richmond visited Perth from Ontario, Canada in January 2007. Join me on the visit. Perth is the capital city of the state of Western Australia with a population of almost 1.5 million people. It's located on the Swan River, almost directly on the Indian Ocean, looking west towards Africa. There are lots of good websites on Perth. I arrived in Perth from Canada in 1976. It was then like a large country town with not much traffic. It's now a major business and tourism center with many international companies and is in the grips of prosperity. The city services much of northwestern Australia, including huge amounts of iron ore shipments to Japan and China, and natural gas. There are many other minerals as well. Ken, Margaret and myself catch the train from my home in Peppermint Grove and Cottesloe to the central business district. It's a quick trip and the trains are very clean and air-conditioned. Let's have a quick look at the city skyline. This is from Kings Park. This panoramic view is taken from Matilda Bay, where the University of Western Australia is located, looking towards Perth. It's a scenic city and is famous for its emblem, the black swan. A view from Perth looking towards South Perth across what's known as the Narrows Bridge. The previous Court government was famous for building the bell tower, an elaborate structure built of green glass. It does look rather pretty at night. Perth is often known as City of Lights, named by the astronauts when they looked at Australia and noticed the large splotch of light. Perth boasts of the 5th highest building in Australia, the Central Tower. It's the highest building in Western Australia. It's got the fastest elevators in Australia, reaching a speed of 35 kilometers an hour. The second highest building in Perth is the Bank West Tower, built by Alan Bond during the euphoria of the America's Cup in the 1980s. Ken, Mark and myself decided to eat at the Saigon Vietnamese restaurant in James Street, Northbridge. I meet every Wednesday with a group of friends called the Prawn Heads, an acronym for the Perth Radio and Wi-Fi Noodle House Eating and Discussion Society. After the meal, we always retire down the street to the Dome Cafe for a cappuccino. We then head down James Street to the City Library, Art Gallery and Museum. We pass the Brass Monkey Hotel, a famous drinking spot, and a hotel with some unique architecture. We approach the Batty Archives and the Central Library. Just beyond that is the Museum of Western Australia. We decide today, however, to give the museum a miss and to explore the art gallery located right next door. Margaret admires the sculpture. When I first saw it, I thought it was The Scream by Edward It's not. It's called The Color and actually predates that sculpture. It was produced in 1967 to celebrate torture victims and survivors. A view from the art gallery looking west towards Perth. We head from the art gallery through the train station, across a bridge and Myers department store to Forest Place. Here's the location of the Central Post Office. The post office overlooks Forest Place, a popular public meeting place. Forest Place and the post office overlook Murray Street, a large shopping mall with no traffic. I've learned that Margaret loves looking in shops, and she's right at home. One of the shops is quite interesting. It's called London Mall. It has some unusual artwork. I guess this is one of the ships that helped colonize or explore the west coast of Australia. Margaret's got a particular interest in opals and decides to buy one as a gift for a friend. We admire the picturesque architecture of His Majesty's Theatre, located on Murray Street. Not too far away is the Entertainment Centre, a popular place for big-name entertainers. Lastly, the Perth Convention Centre, a new structure that has only recently been completed overlooking the Swan River. Dear viewer, I welcome you to this tour of Darwin. This aircraft map shows the approach to Darwin by plane on the northern tip of Australia. It's not a particularly large city for a capital city of a state, and it's well spread out. This city map gives an idea of the airport and the street structure. The central business district. This aerial photograph gives an idea of the central business district with the Parliament buildings on the left. The same shot of Darwin, but from a different angle. This picture highlights the dock area and also shows the Parliament buildings on the bottom. A board welcoming us to Darwin. Tourism top end. The GAN is a recent addition to Darwin, and the railway now connects between Darwin and Adelaide through Alice Springs. It's really a great trip to do. Darwin is famous for its outdoor markets, particularly Pugh, and here we have local buskers. This gentleman's really puzzled about what picture to buy at the Pugh markets. There's lots and lots of yummy food stalls. Local entertainment. Tropical fruit for sale by a local vendor. I did a tour down the Adelaide River outside Darwin on a 2-story river craft. There are lots of saltwater crocodiles. From the second story, we're provided with fishing rods and hang lumps of meat over the edge. The crocodiles recognize the boats, and when hearing the motors, immediately swim up. This is what you see. These beasts are mean, and I wouldn't want to be in a canoe or in the water. More education on crocodiles is provided at this Crocodilus Park. They don't look particularly cuddly even when small. Next, we went to the Northern Territory Museum and Art Gallery. Of course, there's the usual display on dinosaurs. There's a large display on the damage done by Cyclone Tracy, which totally demolished the town of Darwin in 1954. Information is provided on how cyclones start and what sort of power they have. Here's a picture of a building in Darwin after the 1954 cyclone. Even the paint's been stripped off. There are lots of photographs. And not much left to Darwin after the cyclone. Today's houses are air-conditioned, but the early Darwin houses were built for the tropics with lots of ventilation, like this one on display in the museum. Next, we went to visit Litchfield National Park, a few hours' drive outside Darwin. It's famous for its waterfalls and billabongs, many of which you can swim in. Many billabongs around Darwin and in Litchfield National Park contain saltwater or freshwater crocodiles. One has to be very careful when approaching them. There are lots of water buffalo in the Northern Territory. Time to move on, and now we visit the Darwin Zoo. It's famous for Harriet, which is a large tortoise collected by Darwin, Charles Darwin, back in the early 1800s, and it's still alive and living happily in Darwin. Besides the zoo, we visited the Fanny Bay jail. It housed quite a few prisoners during the 1900s until quite recently when it was closed. It's a rather depressing place, and there certainly wasn't any air conditioning. It got extremely hot. Good accommodation to have avoided, I think. Now we look at the Parliament buildings for the state of the Northern Territory. Darwin boasts of some large shopping malls, like any city, and a nice downtown area. Here's a shot showing the central city area. Now a quick look at the botanical gardens in downtown Darwin. Darwin mounted the northern defense against the Japanese invaders in the Second World War and started to be heavily bombed by the Japanese by 1941. There was considerable defenses erected. Here we have a memorial for a sunken U.S. destroyer bombed by the Japanese, and one of its guns has been recovered and put on display. This is a memorial to remember the bombing of Darwin. Provides lots of information. Large tunnels were constructed to contain fuel for the war effort. These tunnels are still there and can be walked through today. picture shows one of the Australian planes used to defend Darwin and fight the Japanese bombers. There's an aircraft museum in Darwin which contains a genuine US B-52 bomber, such as used in the Vietnam War. It's amazing to see how huge this plane actually was. And a more recent plane, an F-111 fighter. During the dry season when I was there, grass fires are frequent. This one is burning around a termite mound, which are quite common outside the city. Darwin sunsets are fantastic and are frequently photographed. The sun sinks deeper and the reds get brighter. Everything becomes silhouetted. Almost gone, and the night descends almost instantly. Thanks, dear viewer, for joining me on this trip to Darwin, Northern Territory. Have a good day. I welcome you, dear viewer, to this quick trip to Brisbane, capital city of Queensland, Australia. My name is Don. This map shows Brisbane situated on the ocean and also on the Brisbane River. The Brisbane River has a number of oxbows and provides a beautiful setting for the city. It is a beautiful city and reminds me much of Perth, where I live. There is an excellent public transport system, as this map shows. A satellite view of the coastline showing the city of Brisbane, situated on the oxbows of the Brisbane River. Here we have a close-up aerial photograph. A view from the plane coming into land, showing the central business district and some of the major bridges across the Brisbane River. The Brisbane Airport is a modern affair. I've been to Brisbane a number of times, but on my last trip I flew from Noumea, French Caledonia, to Brisbane and then on to Perth. Brisbane has grown immensely in the last few years, as this 1959 photograph shows. There are a lot of large buildings under construction. A panoramic view of Brisbane. Most Australian cities are on water, and the ocean and the river are very important to people in Brisbane. Let's just have a few river shots. Cycling along the river on the many cycle paths. The modern freeway system along the river. Sailing. Of course, swimming is very important in the hot climate. Cruising on the Brisbane River. Let's have a quick look at Chinatown. There are some very nice Brisbane malls. Look at all that construction. The tall building to the right is the Brisbane Town Hall. A contrast of the older town hall with modern ultra-tech buildings in the background. The Brisbane Central Business District. A contrast of the old and new. Brisbane by night. I do appreciate your company on this quick trip to Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. Have a good day. Hello viewer, my name's Don. I do appreciate your company on this trip to Canberra in the Australian Capital Territory. After touring around Tasmania, I fly from Hobart to Canberra and land at the airport. Conflict between Sydney and Melbourne led to the choice of Canberra as the Australian capital. An American architect, Burley Griffin, was chosen to design the city from scratch. He did a wonderful job. The old Parliament buildings, built I think in 1927, are still standing. This map shows the triangular shape of the design of the city, with the circular area in the center marking the Parliament buildings. That's probably enough maps, I'd say. An aerial view shows the layout of the Capitol Hill and the Parliament buildings. The Telstra Tower is the highest point and gives a marvelous view of the city. There's the apartment buildings on the far side of Burley Griffin Lake. A wonderful panoramic shot of Canberra. a trip on the lake, with the arch in the background being the National Museum. Here's the old Parliament buildings with an Aboriginal protest flag in the foreground. The new Parliament buildings. A panoramic nighttime shot of the Parliament buildings. The Legislative Council. There are portraits of all the Australian Prime Ministers. Malcolm Fraser to the right. The Australian coat of arms showing the emu and kangaroo. The architectural layout of the Parliament buildings is quite amazing. A view through the Parliament skylights. Queen Elizabeth. There are some beautiful gardens with lots of tulips. I enjoyed visiting the National Library. Probably the highlight of the visit was going to the War Museum. Hello viewer, my name's Don. I do appreciate your company on this trip to Canberra in the Australian Capital Territory. After touring around Tasmania, I fly from Hobart to Canberra and land at the airport. Conflict between Sydney and Melbourne led to the choice of Canberra as the Australian capital. An American architect, Burley Griffin, was chosen to design the city from scratch. He did a wonderful job. The old Parliament buildings, built I think in 1927, are still standing. This map shows the triangular shape of the design of the city, with the circular area in the center marking the Parliament buildings. That's probably enough maps, I'd say. An aerial view shows the layout of the Capitol Hill and the Parliament buildings. The Telstra Tower is the highest point and gives a marvelous view of the city. There's the apartment buildings on the far side of Burley Griffin Lake. A wonderful panoramic shot of Canberra. A trip on the lake, with the arch in the background being the National Museum. Here's the old Parliament buildings with an Aboriginal protest flag in the foreground. The new Parliament buildings. A panoramic nighttime shot of the Parliament buildings.